Welcome to All Good Points Christmas special. I'm Paul North.
And I'm George McBride.
Welcome to the show. We've got quite a lot to go through this week. There's no huge news, but there's quite a lot of nuanced chats that I think will be pretty interesting. And then stay tuned to the end for Prince Andrew watch and another rather weird story that we found. We bought each other jumpers, but we've ended up wearing the ones that we bought.
Yeah, because Paul is ungrateful and doesn't appreciate gifts, and he doesn't understand the spirit of Christmas. But we're here for cannabis news, so that's irrelevant.
Wow, that's slightly slanderous.
Slightly
slanderous, but Paul is not double XL, FYI. Anyway, on to the news. Some quite big news to start things off. A big Canadian update. Aphria and Tilray have combined to create the biggest cannabis company in the world. That's right, isn't it? They will now be the biggest.
They will if the deal closes. I don't think the deal's closed. I think they've got to the point where they've announced it, but obviously these big mergers are quite complicated, or acquisition really, I suppose. I suppose it's Aphria acquiring Tilray.
It's big news.
It's big news. It will, if it all goes through, it'll knock Canopy off the top spot, and it kind of will go on to the other news in Canada, but there is a lot of laying off staff, shuttering facilities. There's a lot of consolidating amongst the bigger companies. I think a lot of us expected to see some of these companies fail and go bust this year. Surprisingly, a lot of them have managed to carry on, but next year it looks like, consolidate or die for a lot of people.
Next year's going to be quite rough.
Yeah.
So the size of this deal is massive. It would create an equity value of about 4.8 billion Canadian dollars, which is over $3 billion American dollars, so it's pretty huge. The enlarged group's 12 months annual sales of 874 million surpasses industry leaders such as Curaleaf Holdings and, as you mentioned, Canopy Growth. They'll trade under Tilray's ticker on NASDAQ, and Aphria's shareholders will own 62% of Tilray stock. There's a lot. I didn't realise this. Aphria have also agreed to acquire the US craft beer company Sweetwater Brewing Company.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
They've both kind of diversified out of cannabis when I think they realised that the revenues weren't going to be as quick as lots of people thought when these companies were being built. So Tilray, a lot of their revenues comes from Manitoba Harvests, which is a hemp food company. So it's a food, alcohol and cannabis group now. Which will be doing, all of that. It's not pure cannabis, and I think that makes sense, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. And Tilray are a partner in Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
They're all lining up for the beverage. The beverages are going to be massitive out there.
I don't think so the beverage is an interesting one because the companies want to push it because it's a higher margin product. You get to, they want to sell cannabis in the way that they sell alcohol, where you can get people spending £6 on a drink that they might have 5 of in a night. Because if you look at the amount of the active compounds that goes into those drinks to strip out the THC, it's worth like a fraction of a penny once you produce at scale in a legal market. So they want value-added products, but we're not really there yet with the technology. The speed of onset's too slow, the duration too long. Cannabis consumers predominantly already have their own habits. They don't want to shift habits. So there's this idea that beverages are going to be huge, and a lot of companies, including Canopy, are kind of relying on it. But there's no evidence that they will be. With some scientific breakthroughs and some good marketing and whatever, it could happen, but it's still just a bit pie in the sky for me.
You don't seem very confident about it. I've heard a lot of people talk quite positively about the innovation aspect of it going as like a long game.
Oh yeah,
like way in the future, it could rival alcohol as a product. But short term, it's not quite
amazing.
there.
I would love to have cannabis pints that tasted delicious, probably not of cannabis, because I don't think the cannabis taste goes well with drinks, really.
Yeah,
but a nice drink that you could drink that would have a similar kind of duration of effect that a pint of beer has would make it a lot more social and avoid the smell and all these kind of other issues, which would be nice and would lead consumers to end up spending much more on the drug than they do otherwise, which is good for the companies, not so much the consumer.
Yeah.
But I still think it's quite a long way off. But I might have a fun.
Where's the tech at the moment? Is it at the stage where it's difficult to get a moderate experience with the drug, and they don't taste great. I've seen a lot of people being like, the taste can be a bit off on some of the products.
Yeah, the taste can be dreadful on some of them.
Pretty lively.
I've had some pretty gross ones.
Have you?
Yeah.
Maybe in the future we all good pints when it all comes out.
Eventually.
5 years from now, when we're haggard, doing all good.
Yeah, I
all good
feel like
pints.
it'd be a lot easier to legalise cannabis in the UK if the delivery mechanism was a pint. Everyone gets.
We love our pints. You just need the Weatherspoons guy to get behind it.
Yeah.
Then he'd be laughing in his little magazine.
Well, look forward to the All Good Pints spin out coming
One
as
day.
soon as the boffins get the technology sorted.
Come on, boffins.
Yeah.
Get on
Sort
it.
out.
In other North American news, Canopy announces the closure of 5 production plants, includes the closure of the St. John's plant, which never actually opened. I mean, it's been quite a rough year for Canopy. Well, the second half of the year in particular has been pretty rough,
Yeah.
stock-wise, and that's not a fantastic sign. It was a $55 million project.
Well, it's not a bad sign, actually. I think if I was an investor in Canopy, they should have done it ages ago. It's
Yeah,
the
fair point.
reality of it.
All good points.
They should have done it ages ago. They don't need all those production facilities. You're talking about a country of 33 million people. You can produce all the cannabis in one facility. There's no reason for any of these large players to have so many facilities unless they're small, high-quality craft producers, which they're not. These are all facilities that got financed by people who were over-excited about the market, and they weren't good plans. So getting rid of those facilities is in Canopy's best interest, and they should have done it ages ago. But it is interesting that they didn't do it quick enough. Now they're watching their competitors consolidate and will now be larger than them, and they risk losing their dominance in the market.
Yeah, that's why the two stories are interesting, isn't it? Because now, Aphria and Tilray combining, Canopy kind of held that, well, we're the biggest company, we'll get through this. But now, they've not really got that trophy on the mantle.
But
anymore.
They are doing better than some of their other competitors, as we'll go on to in the next story, I think.
Aurora lays off 200 staff and reduced production of its flagship Sky cannabis facility. Fresh round of layoffs comes weeks after the company paused operations indefinitely at its huge greenhouse in, how cool is this name? Imagine living in Medicine Hat, Alberta.
Very nice.
What a name. To save money and cope with an industry-wide supply glut. Not Aurora, another company that are having a difficult time, but I guess similar points.
Yeah.
It's kind of good.
Aurora were some of the main, most of those staff aren't there anymore. The whole leadership team's changed. But the leadership team in 2016, 17, 18, they were ones really pushing Canada is going to be supplying a huge global market for cannabis. We need huge production capacity. Saying that they were going to get returns on their investment in that Sky facility within months, when it was hundreds of millions of dollars they spent on it. And I don't think they've returned on that investment in the years since it's been built, let alone months.
Yeah.
So Aurora were real proponents of this glut in supply, which they blame. So they're kind of blaming themselves. But I appreciate that there's new stuff there. I'm not trying to.
Well, no, we're not bashing. You're just saying. You're just saying it how it is.
It's a problem that they caused themselves.
Yeah. That's what's happened when you're overinflation and over expectation of, I guess, global reform and just what the demand in Canada.
Yeah, Canada's actually doing all right. They fixed a lot of the problems. There's a lot better retail environment. There's still a strong medical market. Canada's doing okay. The problem is that these other markets didn't materialise that they thought that they were going to be supplying to. But they're all in trouble, aren't they? This consolidation is to be expected, but it's not a sign of everyone doing really well. This is there's not room for as many big cannabis companies in Canada as there are at the moment. So I expect some of the big players to be going bust.
Yeah, is that prediction-wise? Is that how you see it playing it out? Just a few more mergers, maybe.
Loads more consolidation. I think it makes perfect sense for them to try and survive and build, and there'll be a few big ones left at the end of this. So it's that race to be one of the few big ones left. If you can't be the best, be the biggest.
Yeah, fair.
But yeah, be difficult. And now they're going to face increasing, competition from American companies. There's more interesting cannabis businesses listing from the US on the Canadian exchanges, some really good businesses. So it's going to be more and more competitive.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, of course it is.
That's big Canadian update. Still focused on North America. America's longest serving cannabis offender was released from prison Richard Delseed served 31 years in prison for non-violent cannabis offence, believed to be the longest cannabis sentence served in the US. He got 90 years in 1989 for trafficking cannabis. Now, I think he had quite a lot. I think it was like £100, yeah. Oh, no, right. Of weed, like, it was a serious...
Yeah, but Jesus Christ, you know...
Oh, I'm not saying it was fine, I'm just saying, like, it was one of them where it was like, okay, that's quite a lot of weed, but still, like, 90 years.
Yeah, but I doubt it was his, if he was the one bloody driving it over borders. You
can tell he used to be a barrister. You're like...
Well, if you had hundreds of pounds of cannabis... You're not going to drive it over the border yourself, are you?
No, probably not.
You're going to pass that on to say he's just a drug mule. But I don't know the details of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know the guy, so
I don't know if Richard watches the show. But what good news, 31 years, well, he's out.
Yeah, thank God. It's horrendous to think how many people are languishing in prisons in the US still for non-violent drug offences. Yeah,
it's way too many. There's a great project that worked on this, the Last Prisoner Project, advocated for his release, which is a non-for-profit that calls for reforms in criminal justice and advocates for people that are serving some of these ridiculously long sentences. But a good sign, hopefully a good sign that under a Biden government they might start expunge some of those records, reduce that prison population.
Fingers crossed, eh?
Fingers crossed, big time.
When you say that?
Buddy? That's on your next year's phrases you're working on.
Yeah.
Buddy. I like it. In other news, sort of close to home, the UK, what are we doing? The UK withholding approval for a bill proposing cannabis reform in the British Virgin Isles.
I think this is quite interesting because normally the Foreign Office would just give royal assent to the plan. So it's an overseas, whatever you call it, overseas territory of the UK. And normally they just get royal assent. So they're still, their sovereignty comes from the UK, but they just pass whatever legislation. But because of the international framework for controlling cannabis created by the UN, the UK has to report there, and that creates complications for the UK. And their feeling is that they can't just approve these things. But it's rather odd when you look at the fact that we've just seen people in the UN that are quite concerned about how much has been licensed for cultivation around Europe and around the world, and issues of oversupply. And well, if there's oversupply, where's it going to go? Is it going to get diverted onto the black market? Real problems if you're looking at it through their lens of potential diversion and whatever. But really sad for people in the British Virgin Islands that they have their independence and sovereignty on most issues, yet can't actually determine their own policies when it comes to cannabis. Yeah, it doesn't seem fair. It's a good bill as well, proposed to decriminalise personal possession of cannabis. The UK argue the bill needs to be examined to ensure treaty obligations are met. Yeah, but I don't think we should be meeting our treaty obligations, I think is the bottom line. But, and that's the one way to go about it. Canada has licensed a huge amount of cannabis for the recreational market, and they're just openly saying, we're not
too bothered about that one.
Obligations. Yeah. And people spent years in drug reform talking about how do we do this, fix this at the UN, and then it turns out you can just ignore it.
You just do it anyway, and everything's fine.
They don't have any enforcement action that they can take, really. So if the UK just wanted to say, we're going to do what we want, the UK government does what it wants with Brexit negotiations regarding, breaking international law, but then uses it as cover when they don't want to allow the growth of the cannabis industry. I think it's savage.
It is savage. But I mean, hopefully, it's not unprecedented for us to kind of permit those things. Like you said, there are other...
Well, the Jersey thing's all happening now, and that took way longer than expected. So it may just be...
How long was that? Like years?
Yeah, well over a year of back and forward with the UK authorities. So it may just be that the BVIs get trapped in this and have to end up looking at having much longer discussions with the Home Office that may have to influence their legislation.
It's a good sign for wider reform that this is happening, though, isn't it? Because it's demonstrating to the British government and the Home Office that, like, if we don't get on board and do something, other places are doing it. I think what I think is quite useful there is the discussions that are probably taking place in the Home Office at a political level. There will be some chats going and people going like, oh man, like this is going to keep happening.
Yeah, it is.
It's not like it's a one-off.
No.
I guess this is a similar theme in Bermuda. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, but the UK government as well seems to just be kind of pushing out responsibility for cannabis onto these weird tax havens around the place. and they haven't been licensing cannabis facilities in the UK yet. They're licensing them out in Jersey, which seems to be a kind of a washing their hands of it situation.
Yeah, just not on our turf sort of thing.
Yep.
In Bermuda, the Cannabis Licensing Act 2020 has been proposed for debate. The bill proposes a categorised licensing system for cultivation, retail, import, manufacture, export, research, transport and cannabis event licences. It would be adult use regulation for over 21s, aims to reduce the illicit trade and related harms, and the bill's going to be debated. See how that goes.
Cannabis industry's taught me a lot about tax havens. That's one thing I'd say on that.
Don't link into Prince Andrew yet, because you could branch this into Epstein.
No, I'm not going to go on that rant. But
not yet. It's on the list.
Have you noticed there is a strong correlation between kind of semi-independent, states like Jersey, the Isle of Man, places like BVI's, Bermuda, lots of places around the world which have favourable tax status. Small populations.
Malta, would Malta count?
In. Malta probably would count because they're a small country, and even though they're part of the EU and they're not a tax haven, they have low rates of tax deliberately. So all of these places seem to be experimenting with their cannabis policies, and that they seem to be the kind of test ground for cannabis reform in a lot of the kind of.
Why do you think they do that? Do you think it's a case that they can and they think, let's try and be a world leader?
Yeah, it's a case that they can.
Let's get some economy in. Like, why not?
Exactly.
Less
and they
people
all
involved.
think that the industry is going to be huge for them, and I think hopefully, potentially, it could be in some of these places, not all of them, but they have that alacrity by being small states to come and deal with these things and make change quite rapidly. Although sometimes that gets held up, but if you don't have full independence from UK government, then you're going to find out that you're stuck in this whole UN quagmire.
They should do a revolution.
Just lively. If you want Paul to get involved, he'll do a coup.
Anyone want to do a campaign on a cannabis revolution in the British Virgin Islands? Get in touch, paul@volteface.me. You're Irish, you're part Irish, aren't you?
Yeah, pretty much full Irish.
Are you full Irish?
Both my parents are Irish.
Okay, fine.
My heritage is a bit more complicated.
Okay. Well, you'll like this. In Ireland, cannabis is to be added to the adult caution list. Or maybe you will like this. The adult caution programme was introduced 14 years ago. Cannabis has been added to the programme. It means the Gardaí.
The Garda, yeah.
Have I said that right? Can issue a caution to anyone found in possession of cannabis for personal use instead of being arrested and convicted. That's a good news story. I mean, it's still not great. It's still a state criminal intervention.
Yeah. It feels like they could have gone further. Every time they do something, it's like, yes, that's better, but why just keep tweaking it so slowly, so far behind kind of general public attitudes to this stuff? But progress.
Caution. I mean, it's a step in the right direction.
When you read it in conjunction with the other island story, they're fixing their medical system to allow access, so you don't have this insane situation where there are Irish patients having to fly
all the way to the Netherlands
to get cannabis and fly home. Well, that's very good news, isn't it?
That is good news, yeah. So medical cannabis patients will now receive permanent delivery of cannabis treatments. Previously, they had to travel to Netherlands to collect medications, which were permitted through a special licence from the health minister. In response to the pandemic, these cannabis treatments were temporarily delivered to patients, but it was proposed the system would end with the easing of COVID restrictions, but the health minister has confirmed they will remain in place. That's good. I hate needless, unnecessary, ridiculous bureaucracy.
We don't like the bureaucrats at all.
We do not like the bureaucrats, unless they help us with the revolution.
Yeah.
I'm really not into revolutions. I don't know why I keep pushing revolution.
No, and I'm anti-bureaucrats.
Yeah, well, it's like, we're actually pro-bureaucrat.
No.
So yeah, good stuff in Ireland. Always good to see less criminalisation, although cautions really still don't. I mean, caution still feels a bit harsh. We should be going further. And medical cannabis stuff, positive news. What's the medical programme like there in Ireland? Average?
No, it was like an exceptional situation where you need the health minister to sign off on it, and now they've got a trial. They're calling it a trial, but it'll almost definitely be put into permanent. But that starts next year. So it's been terrible for Irish patients. Vera Twomey and others have done really good work at lobbying government and campaigning, but it's been a really painfully slow process for Irish patients, unfortunately. But, and good news, it looks like it's all changing next year and getting sorted out.
I just remembered, Ant, we're doing an event on Thursday this week, if you want to hear more about Ireland and the work we're doing, we're speaking to some Irish advocates as part of the ECAN event. So if you want to learn more, find out and tune in. There'll be a Q&A session so you can ask these questions. I'll be there. Over 80 tickets sold. Get involved. So that's Ireland. Sorry, just shameless plug there, as I remembered we're doing an event tomorrow. Back to the US. The US House of Representatives passes a bill to expand medical cannabis research, to create a less cumbersome registration process for cannabis research, and require the DEA and the Department of Health and Human Services to approve research applications in a timely fashion.
Yeah, so
good news?
Yeah, very good news. I don't know if you know how it worked previously. You might do, but it was mad. There's only one university, Mississippi, that was allowed to grow cannabis for research. And by all accounts, no offense to anyone who grows cannabis at the University of Mississippi, but it wasn't very good cannabis. And so you ended up having the only legal research being done on cannabis that nobody is smoking, that is only grown for research purposes, that's of notoriously poor quality. And so you're not actually understanding the impact of cannabis use on the health of people around the US. Like, they need to be taking cannabis that people are actually smoking that is being sold in shops and testing that, obviously. And the restrictions on the research in the US are still incredibly overbearing. If you compare it to anywhere else, like the UK, Israel, Canada, where there's a relatively thriving cannabis research, and there was even plenty of cannabis research whilst prohibition was in full swing, whereas the US just blanket no, with a very bizarre situation of having one exception. So the fact that they're fixing this is very important. The US needs to be doing a lot more research. There's a load more reform needed to widen it out properly, but it's progress.
It is progress, and hopefully under a Biden government, that's something that...
Are you really pro-Biden Democrat flag waving this week, Paul?
I've just seen people say it on Twitter, and I want to be popular. I'm just copying what people say on Twitter.
P.S. He's not.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
It'll probably be quite similar.
It's going to be less racist, sexist, and generally offensive on TV, but much of the same in every other regard.
It's all about the policies for me, George, not the personality. That's my politics. Policies, not personalities.
Oh, yeah.
Don't fall into the trap of it being a personality contest. But he seems a nice guy.
Does he?
I don't know.
I don't like him. I've got a firm anti-Biden view.
Really?
Yeah. Trump was a scumbag, in my opinion, but I've hated Biden for a very long time.
Let's get this.
So I'm not happy about that.
Let's get it out of the way now. On here it does say Prince Andrew watch. Are you wanting to give a Prince Andrew update?
I think that we were actually going to talk about that.
Okay, we don't have to. We'll go on to it. You can't put it on the cheat and be like, exactly, I didn't think you were going to read it out.
Anything I put on the teleprompter, Paul will read.
It's like Anchorman.
Yeah. Prince Andrew caught fibbing again. So they've proven that he was staying at Epstein's house, and contrary to the interview that he had, in which he clearly outed himself as a sexual offender of one of the worst varieties, and yet he's the Queen's son, and he's just gallivanting around in palaces, having a drink this whole time. It's a piss take.
Hey, well, you know, I know it's a passion of yours. I stay out of the.
Catch him. We've got to catch him.
I'm just waiting for the series of The Crown. That'll settle it for me. I know it's a historically accurate programme. It's very accurate, and I think that will bring out the truth. I'm waiting for The Crown, season 9 of The Crown. The Cannabis Dismantling Squad have been busy. This is our final story. They've been at it again. The Cannabis Dismantling Squad.
Yeah.
There's a raid on a cannabis farm after a man accidentally showed police a video of his plants. So this guy was pulled over by the police in lovely city of Sunderland. If you've ever been, it's a real sunny spot, nice spot of the world. Got pulled over, got his phone out. He didn't speak English, so got his phone out to Google Translate what he was trying to say to the copper, and managed to play a video of a cannabis farm. And they were like, smells of weed, and you've just shown us a video of what appears to be a massive cannabis farm. You're coming in.
That's
they took him
how
in,
easy it is to be a cannabis dismantler.
Yeah, that's just like what we've gone today.
Should take no pride in their job, because it is the easiest job.
Yeah, they just sit there.
Of mankind. There are cannabis farms up and down the country,
just blatantly
full of stoned people sharing videos of them. So if you can't dismantle a cannabis farm, I don't know what you can do.
Bless them. They work hard though, George. That's the main thing.
Catch Prince Andrew. That's what I say to do if you're a policeman. Get on with your job.
Last thing to finish on reflection. This is the last show of the year. So, for you, George, what was the biggest cannabis news story of 2020? I know we've only just started doing these, but if you think back across the year, what's been your standout
Weirdly,
story?
all of the biggest stories seem to have just kind of all happened towards the end of the year. A lot of them. I think I am going to go with the whole EU debacle with first cannabis. You can include it in foods, and there's this novel foods thing, and everyone's saying, right, CBD's great, you can sell it. And then the European Commission come out and say, no, it's actually a drug, to which everybody's like, what? Well, we've been engaging this process with you for ages, and now you're saying it's a drug. To which the European Court of Justice, in an unexpected result, I think most people were expecting them to affirm the status quo, because they normally don't go against the European Commission. But they showed some bravery and independence of mind and said that CBD is not a drug and should be able to be, and therefore, well, they didn't say this, but the result of that decision is that it can be included in foods. So what we can look forward to is cannabis extracts in the future, down the road, being sold legally across the whole of the EU, and this confirmation that CBD is not a drug. And I think it's really interesting because obviously CBD is a drug in one sense. It's a licensed pharmaceutical in the form of Epidiolex and sold at a huge premium to people with pediatric epilepsy or to their healthcare supplies. But then also, it just doesn't do anything for the large majority of people if you're not epileptic. And is being sold in foods and drinks all over the world. And there's been like a raging debate all year about what is CBD and how do we deal with it. And I think it links in with, there was another news story that you're now allowed to sell CBD over the counter in Australia that we weren't going to talk about. But that news story of what is CBD and what can happen with it, that's ended up having to have the most authoritative court in Europe presiding over it. Something that wouldn't have happened with cannabis in years gone by, being a massive decision for commerce and in the biggest court in Europe.
Definitely.
Bit boring, but that's...
No, I like it. It was detail. I like it. It was very policy-ish. You're going to ask me about it.
Paul, what was your favourite cannabis story of 2020?
I'm glad you asked, George, because I was thinking about it before. So I think the New Zealand referendum, which might be surprising because it wasn't a very good outcome, it was a negative outcome. But in terms of the biggest story, I think it teaches us a lot. I think it tells us a lot about what we do need to do in campaigns, things we should learn from. I think it kind of sets the scene for 2021, that if we want to see further reform in the future, we need more engagement from the industry. Advocacy needs to learn from what's not worked and be creative around what will work. So I think New Zealand wasn't particularly good news, but I think if we look at it positively as a learning experience, particularly from an advocacy angle, I think we can learn a great deal. And for me, New Zealand was a really important warning that amongst all the big news and the good stuff that we've got excited about, you still need to do it right. Like campaigns, there's a lot of stigma around cannabis still, and we can't get lazy on that. We've got to confront that in a positive, evidence-based way.
Yeah. I think that's a good one as well, because I don't think either of those ones would have been one from somebody in North America asked what was the biggest thing of this year. None of them, they wouldn't have even been on their radar. But you learn more from your failures than your successes,
100%.
don't you? And New Zealand, there's a lot to learn. If the industry had got behind the yes vote in the way that the church groups got behind the no vote, it would have been a very different situation.
I agree, definitely. That's 2020, George. It's a 2020 wrap. Yeah.
Goodbye to a horrible year.
Goodbye 2020. But thank you to everybody that's listened and watched the show since we started. It's been really nice getting the support from people.
Let us know what you want to see in 2021. We're going to do more features. I know some of you have already asked for info on social clubs and UK market sizing, and we can dig into all that kind of stuff, and we've got lots of interesting features we can run. So let us know what you want next year.
Definitely. And we're going to be a podcast as well. We're about to go on Spotify. So if in the future, if you just want an audio-only version and you don't want to see our faces, no offense, horrible jumpers and faces, then you can.
This is quite a good jumper. So.
Well, this is a good jumper. It's got Yoda on it.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Oh,
well, that's not
Gruder.
Yoda, is it? That's the other one.
It's the Gruder guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in 2021.